Hi, my name is Tim Carter. This is the IamCorne.org apologetic and outreach website of Landmark Missionary Baptist Church. We gather at 2200 Marshall Road in Jacksonville, Arkansas. We have probably covered, I don't know how many topics, but we usually from feedback, we then compose that material and then give back, let's say, another presentation. But this one is about why atheists and anyone, I guess, who rejects the Bible dare not define free will. For example, in this book by Sam Harris, he's touted as someone in the field of neuroscience. He's somewhat of a prolific author now, and he debates people. But if he were to be in a conversation with us, for example, members of one of the Lord's New Testament churches who have been entrusted the truth and the responsibility of making disciples for the last 2,000 years, according to that truth, then he would learn very quickly that we have a definition of free will. He doesn't define it in this book. He describes it as on one hand, that perhaps someone might have done something differently in the past than what they did or they could have, or perhaps on the other hand that we assume that we are conscious of most of the thoughts that are racing through our brain, I believe is his statement. As though I guess if we're not aware of most of them, then we can't really be making any decisions. So he doesn't define free will. That's not noticed by those who read and subscribe to this book. The typical definitions are libertarianism, which is a large, ever-expanding, subjective philosophical description, or on the other hand, the atheistic philosopher David Hume, and compatibilism, which is again very subjective, very philosophical, very abstract. According to the Bible, you can just get this little English grammar book about the Hebrew language. You never have to study Hebrew. That is, if you just want to understand the different types of things emphasized, like causative action in the Hebrew Bible. Well, I would say we're looking at more than 4,000 years ago. We're looking 3,500 years to 4,000 years ago written literature and documents. But it says causative is whereby the subject causes something to happen to someone or something. The idea is that we cause something to happen, and that includes ourselves. Sometimes we're both subjects, the one who causes, and then we're the one being caused. Agent causation is the oldest definition of free will. Striking as it might be, in Genesis 15:6, the Hebrew there says Abram caused Abram to believe. So you cause you to believe. And the Koine Greek New Testament, very simple language, very highly inflected, very worded out, so that it's almost, it is redundant in many places, but it's for emphasis. The deliberative subjunctive is used. For example, in John 20:31, the gospel, the attesting miracles, and their contextualized narratives have been written and remain on record in order that you and I might deliberately cause ourselves to believe, support that Jesus is the Christ. Well, the judicial system itself, as we know it in the United States of America, hinges upon agent causation. Now, a person says there's extenuating circumstances. Well, of course. Punishment is still meted out according to the actions that the person caused him or herself to do to someone else, particularly, for example, either in stealing property or causing bodily harm, whatever we want to call it. The Bible even says be angry, but it says don't sin, that is, don't break the law, that is, don't commit an infraction against law of God, law of humanity. So you can see that atheists, for example, let's say Sam Harris, which he advocates conversational intolerance, so I could see why he would omit and not tolerate in his cute little book, and I say cute in a diminutive way, because he omitted the definition of free will according to the ancient earliest understanding of it, because even the libertarian abstract concept, philosophical as it might be, and is impressive to those who simply want to enjoy mental gymnastics, I suppose it's futile. And then compatibilism on the other hand, those who want to ignore it, really defining it is something neither compatibilists want to do, libertarians don't want to do it, and atheists don't want to do it. So at least they're all in the same camp, because to dare to define this word according to the earliest usage, you'll find both the compatibilist camp averse to agent causation and the libertarian camp averse to agent causation. Even ancient philosophers might say that the mover moved the stick moved the rock, but the mover didn't move himself, and yet that's exactly what the Bible says. So I can see why those of us, all of us as people, would like to justify ourselves. We'd like to say we acted on some impulse, or as he says in some more of elaborate expressions about that we're just the composite of experiences, genetics, whatever he describes the composition of man, the physiological makeup of man and the past experiences, and how whatever preceded us becomes the basis of what causes us in the future. Well, you can see why that leaves out and omits the very soul of man, the very person. So he talks about will, and that's another thing that really we need to back up there, because to deny man has a will, that's fine, but you can't deny the person who doesn't have the will. The person, we, you, I, cause you, I, cause I, you cause you, he causes he, we cause we to do whatever we do. So to try to somehow suppose he's accomplished something by saying man doesn't have a will, or if he does it's not free. First, he doesn't define the word free. One definition is exempt, and no Christians ever said that it's will, that is the desires we have, which are plural in the Bible. We have both desires, wills of the flesh and wills of the mind. Sam Harris didn't acknowledge that. And it wasn't that he should. I would never expect the young man to be aware of something like that, nor would I expect him to negate his own field of study by including information that was far more prevalent and antedated anything he subsequently conjured, because he can just tell you honestly, to be true to his inconsistency with reality, that he can't tell you why or what caused him to cause himself to write this book, about how he didn't cause himself to write this book. So while you're playing around, that's okay, but just know that when a crime is perpetrated upon someone, there's still the doctrine of agent causation, and it's foundational to a free society and the working and efficiency of it. And no, there's nowhere in the Bible, nowhere in civilized nations do people say, well, this crime against humanity, this crime against inalienable rights, such as that which Sam Harris advocates, such as conversational intolerance. Baptists, for example, which I'm sure he would never want to talk with us, we have a history of where people like him attached tongue screws to us because they didn't want to tolerate what we had to say. But one thing no one will tolerate: atheist, libertarian, free will advocates, compatibilistic free will advocates. They will not tolerate defining free will from the Bible, which is agent causation. It's according to an inflectional morpheme. It's according to a stem in the biblical Hebrew. It's self-evident. It's the basis of all rational society and civil societies that conduct themselves in a manner that assures that justice is properly meted out and adjudicated and litigated accordingly. So in the realm of reality, not the realm of that which he himself says he cannot know. He says most of what takes place in his brain, he's unaware of it. I wouldn't know which part he used to appraise that part. I've always been intrigued with that since 1980, when I was in a class and a professor drew a circle with 4 quadrants and was describing the brain. He said, now this part this part this, part 3 this, and then he said, now this part we don't know about. So I asked the question, which part of our brain did we use to investigate that ignorance of that 4th part? So it was not funny then, it's not funny now. It is a fact throughout history that brought us here today through Christians, not state-established religionists nor state-established religions, but rather those who had advocates of the gospel who trusted it and recognized no state church, as we don't recognize in this country. There's no church of the United States. Well, we advocated agent causation. People are culpable because a person is responsible and causes him or herself to do or not do. So in the Bible, when someone is an unbeliever, they are literally, deliberately in that process to cause him or herself to disbelieve. And a person who believes is in that process of deliberately acting to cause him or herself to believe. And of course, to believe, the simplest form of action, the gospel, then a person is born again. Then they're always they're a person then the Bible describes as who is always in a process of deliberately causing him or herself to believe, keep on believing. So there's nothing wrong with the book. It just speaks to things that have no basis in reality. So I agree with him. According to the two ways he's described free will, I agree with him that there's no such thing. According to the third way, the first way, the precedent upon which all understanding would have otherwise been based, which he totally is either ignorant of it or ignored it, which would result in his ignorance. That way was not even discussed in this. And that way is not abstract, it's not strange, and nor does it lead someone like myself, pastor of a New Testament church in Jacksonville, Arkansas, to go out and tell people that I'm advocating conversational intolerance. That will never do in the United States of America. That will never do for people who are here to collaborate with our founding framers, the political scientists. And agent causation simply states what others will not dare define according to the Bible. You cause you to believe. You cause you to disbelieve. You cause you to do or not do. And whatever's going on at the time, your emotions, your feelings, your psyche, all of the mechanics of the brain, and elaborate as that might be and complex, you ultimately will do it, regardless of how your which way your will is leaning, which way your emotions are directed, or your brain chemicals are imbalanced or balanced. You cause you ultimately. So with that in mind, it's not fun. I agree, it's more fun to imagine things, and it's more fun to go out there and intentionally try to provoke people, as he suggested, that if science denies free will, it'll be as upsetting to the world as advocating evolution. So it's sensationalism. This is really not a science book. It's written by a person who's involved in a field of science, but if he wrote down those things like Richard Dawkins, who'd read the book? Who would care to read such technical matters that have no commercial value? So you go out there and you play this type of game here, and you advocate things that are sensational and would alarm the most people en masse. So that's why he omitted the definition. So you have a blessed day, and matter of fact, cause yourself to do something good today.